Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GCNC Worldview. It's great to be back talking about one of my favorite topics, which is goings on in Latin America. I'm actually still recording from southern Mexico. Been talking to a lot of people about the movements here. Today, we're going to talk and touch on things happening down in Panama and Colombia. And just before we hop into that, I'm going to do a little plug for Peru. The Global Cannabis Network Collective is working on some new webinars that are going to lead up to an event that we're working with the Peruvian Stock Exchange and the Export Association. So we'll be filling people in on more of those details in the coming weeks and months, but keep your eyes out for that. And of course, subscribe to the podcast so you get all the latest updates. Also, it wouldn't be fair to start without thanking our sponsors. So thanks so much to our global sponsor, Bovida, and all of our GCNC members around the world who make sure we're always informed and on top of sort of global market movements. Tim, Gordon. The lead dog over there at Gordon Cannabis. It's been a little while since we talked, but it's great to see you. Thanks so much for coming back on. Last time we were talking about cultivation, but today we're going to be talking about Panama and Colombia.
Yeah. It's great to be back on. Great to see you. It's been a while since we talked, but man, there's lots to catch up on. So this will be fun.
For sure. So before we dig too much into your globetrotting ways, what projects and what have you got going on at Gordon Cannabis right now? I know you've got some domestic things happening, but what have you had your fingers in, and what are you seeing in terms of U.S. market movement?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of movement, a lot of dynamics still happening. As you know, we're coming up to an election cycle and everything like that. So there's a lot playing out in the psyche of cannabis here in the United States. It's a lot of the what ifs, what will happen, should we plan for some kind of federal legalization change or movement. So there's a lot of that going on. And by say a lot, I will say, a majority of the revenue earning companies, the MSOs, some of these other folks who have the opportunity to really to play in that potential, interstate, and then, what even a global opportunity may look like in the future. So, there's a lot of good movement even within states. There's still a lot of opportunity within new states coming online, both medicinally and recreationally. And we still have a few states that are falling, still kind of catching up in a sense, but I'm sure they will.
Yeah, thanks for that mention, because it always gives me an opportunity to rag on Texas. Texas, get your act together, for God's sakes. There's others, but you're the last big one standing. It's time to get with it. All right, that's just my regular poke.
No, you're right. You're right.
So, but as everything flows, I have had quite a bit of chatter over the last couple of weeks. Did actually an interview with some folks out of the UK that were asking questions about the rescheduling and descheduling. And within the context of this conversation, it's interesting because if anything loosens up there, it will by default also loosen up a lot of global opportunity that has been held back for a while. So,
good point.
As we're looking through that, we haven't talked much about Central America on this podcast or otherwise in almost a year. About 2 years ago, it was a hot topic, what's going on in Colombia and how are things going to flow. But things quieted down, but I know you were down there. And so I wanted to jump at the opportunity to get your take on, what's happening in the Panamanian market and how that's influencing other surrounding areas.
Sure. Yeah, well, I just had the opportunity to go down there about a week ago. Great visit between Panama and Colombia. And, Chris, here's a high level, right? As the global opportunity continues on, countries like Panama and coming on, in the timing that they have with issuing licenses, and the folks that are going to be, doing that in their first intel of this opportunity, really have, a unique, time to negotiate the cannabis space, right? Things change so dramatically. So um, what I do see is folks starting to really, get down to really strategic business as to, what's happening right now and what's my future going to be like, as this industry comes online with changes here and with potential other changes in South American countries and new countries coming on. All of these guys are really in that area of cultivation, what I call the global area of cultivation, right? Here are those equatorial areas where, cannabis can be produced at large scale, whether it's for industrial use or whether it's for medicinal use or however you might classify cannabis. Those areas I think are going to compete on a soon to be global cannabis level. So I think Panama is going to be setting up for that. There's some teams down there are making those discussions and making those plans for the future.
Yeah, if I'm in Panama right now and talking about licenses, what do those licenses look like? I mean, what's the existing framework that exists down there today, or that they're working towards?
So I think they're taking, a multitude of approach, listening to folks and doing some solid research on how to structure these licenses and how to make them opportunistic. So, the licenses largely look like right now, you are given a license to, produce cannabis at scale, whatever that scale may be, to be able to dry that cannabis, process that cannabis, and put it onto a potential global medicinal market. So, and currently right now, that's kind of the framework and where the opportunity lies. Now, that may change in time, but that's just the beginning stair steps there. So.
Yeah, and that's export driven in their model, right?
It is export driven in their model. And I think it's a good model to consider. Now, it has to be futuristic and thinking like I was talking about earlier, but it is a good model to set up. Now, will it be like financially viable and strong? Like some people expect cannabis just to be green and show me the money kind of thing. This model, I think, is set up for the long-term opportunity, but you got to be able to weather the short-term storms there. So,
yeah, I was having a conversation with a friend in Europe the other day that was talking about what I think is going to be a challenge for a lot of Central and South America when they talk about exports, because there's a huge sort of rising glut of production in Europe that's they don't really have a viable market for yet. And we've seen what happens in places like Oregon and California and others, right? When you get ahead of the market, you build too much production capacity too fast. And I think not individual countries necessarily, but that region that you just referenced overall, it's going to have a few years of struggle while everything balances out. So as always, I'm encouraging people to look at those kind of trends you're talking about, but also pay attention short run and make sure you're in it for the long haul, because it's going to take some time.
It is. Yeah. Chris, you bring up such a good point right there. When you look at, what's going to happen within the region and what can supply. And, when you look out, you have to look, even like equatorially, like across your lines here as a country, come up to that 100,000 foot view and look east and look west and see who else is going to be playing in those global opportunities. You talked about, a gluttony of cannabis being produced on multiple markets, whether it's stateside or whether it's global. That's the truth. And the facts are, that's likely to happen in new and, upcoming markets as they establish market trends and stuff like that. And like you said, there's going to be some storms to weather in that circumstance.
Yeah, there is. But I mean, the good news for all of us, I think, because I always like to deliver sort of some hard knocks with the long view, because I think the long view is a good story for people who plan. It's really good.
Yeah. Long view, it already is, but long view, it gets cleaner, right? Cannabis is already a global opportunity, right? That's real. Long view in the future here, as we change our regulatory premise, as multiple countries across the globe do, you're in, a first mover advantage opportunity still in the global opportunity. So yeah, folks in Panama, like I said, they're setting it up for opportunistic. It's going to be down the road, but yeah.
That's cool. And since you've now been in Colombia much more recently than I, what's the temperature there? Because we have several GCNC members there, and I talk to them frequently. But what was your interpretation of the temperature and how they're feeling?
Yeah. Well, I would say the temperature is, you have a palpable temperature.
Yeah.
It's there. Chris, they've gone through such a dynamic change, as you notice, over these last couple of years there, where I think the licensing has, almost shrunk over 70% compared to what was given. And, when it comes down to it, how many folks have actually imported or exported out of the country? Out of all those thousands of licenses, I think it's less than a dozen.
Yeah.
So where they are, I think there's the settling of the dust, the settling of the storm. They're not, necessarily coming out of it yet, but the opportunities are starting to show that you can come out of it, both inter-region. I guess we talk about more countries coming on, more opportunities for cannabis within region, and then more opportunities for a global scale. So yeah, I think they're kind of getting themselves ready after kind of dealing with a quick downfall in the space due to a variety of factors.
Yeah, yeah. They the structure there, I think, was designed for a survival of the fittest approach.
Yeah.
And now what they have is a lot of lessons learned and some really solid operators who still haven't necessarily found their way through to what is the long-term model, but they are a hell of a lot closer.
Yeah.
And I think we all know that whole sector and that region is likely to be led in South America by Colombia and Brazil.
I agree.
Right?
Largely, absolutely. Yeah. Both of those guys, huge agriculture companies, huge, both dairy and meat countries. So yeah, I would largely agree with that. Even on the cannabis side, they're, from the folks who are members of the GCNC down there know all that well. There's a lot of opportunity, just like there's in Panama, for the country of Colombia and the groups down there to really have an impact.
Yeah, and we all know they've still got some great genetics, and they've got some great opportunities in that space to really conquer over the long haul.
Yes.
Knowing your background in research and genetics and all of that, I also wanted to pivot a little bit and just ask, like, what do you see in terms of strain management, I'll call it, in different parts of the world, and how, as countries have been passing laws that are allowing the movement of seeds around, what do you think that's going to look like?
Yeah.
Is it a good or a bad thing? I can't actually quite tell.
Well, Chris, I gotta say, this is a great question too, but it's also one of those dynamic things about cannabis industry, right? A lot of times this stuff is happening already before we even want to talk about it. Meaning, like, genetics from the United States are reaching Thailand, and genetics from Canada or from South America are coming here and being bred in to different varieties. Here's going to be the fact for these guys who are going to be going at scale, much like they do cut flowers and those modified greenhouse kind of styles and stuff like that, outdoor production. I'm going to call these genetics. They're going to have to be, genetics of regional adaptability, right? And that's the big one, because it's an equatorial environment, and having everything that can be like strong, in resistance to pests, but stronger in opportunities from the sun and production of cannabinoids or whatever the end use may be. But there's a lot of really good genetics, and that's the thing about the cannabis plant, and it's genome structure, its genome over the centuries. It's very it's opportunistic. There's a lot of opportunity for breeding and a lot of opportunity for adaptability. And there's several groups. Some of them I think are members of the GCNC, have worked on a variety of different genetic projects down there in Colombia. Some of the same ones are likely going to be providing genetics up in Panama as well. So there's on the genetic side, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity. There's some cool regional stuff that will likely be bred for specific THC or terpene content with some of the other stuff that's already being brought into country down there. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Got to look at some.
You mentioned terpenes, and I remember when I first got into the cannabis industry, which was not all that long ago, especially relative to you. The there was any question had nothing to do with anything other than uh, THC. You might talk about CBD. Nobody talked about terpenes in the industry at that point. Now it's definitely a huge part of the professional discussion finally.
Yeah.
But yet as I travel, depending on the maturity of the market, I see the same patterns start all over again, right? Like every
For sure.
time it's well, what's the THC content? That's all anybody cares about for a year and a half or two, and then it starts to
Mhm.
develop. I'm not going to lead the witness. I'm just going to ask the question and say, like, how, as markets get more sophisticated, are you seeing terpenes start to play in sort of how people are analyzing what they want to grow, how they deploy
Yeah.
product?
Yeah, I would say at this point in certain US markets, it's the driver, to be honest with you. And it's the driver both on the plant side and leading into end use products. And I think we'll see that even at scale, as the markets mature, right? Whether it's, a high THC, high terp flower, or whether it's just a high terpene, low THC flower, or even let's even like when we talk about countries like Panama and Colombia and the opportunities there, we talk about global opportunities with their equatorial cycles that they can produce cannabis on, and those go down to like where you can produce large amounts of cannabis where those single molecules can be produced at scale, THC or a specific terpene. I call those in cannabis molecules of monetization, where you can actually track those in the plant all the way to an end product, and it's $1, or so, when you look at how that all works on the global scale. So cannabis brings a really big opportunity to multiple markets once it's done at scale and once those molecules are isolated.
Do you do you think that's gonna play an equally important role, whether it's a adult use recreational market versus a medicinal market?
I think the adult use recreational market will frame up much like the US market, which you can call the gorilla in the room globally, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I see a lot of those dynamics is changing, where it's terpene driven. We have a variety of products like even rosin or resin that are now judged on scales of 1 to 6, 1 to 5 that are very specific to palate and to the nose, and that's all terpene driven. So
Okay. Yeah, I kind of speculated, but I wanted to hear. I tend to like try and lead people down the answer I want to hear, and I didn't want to do that this time. So
well, you've got
yeah,
your finger on the pulse of the industry enough. You can, yeah, you understand how this is all shaping up. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I think the folks in South America down there, although it may be a time, just getting going and stuff like that, it is first mover opportunistic on a futuristic cannabis opportunity that's really global and is already a multi-billion-dollar industry. So
yeah. Well, and I think those markets are. Well, people have gotten tired of waiting for the US to quote unquote lead. We're not doing it. We're not going to. Even if we legalize, we'll be chasing now. And as that realization has become more and more true, it's been nice to see people, and this is my opinion, but it's been nice to see people start to go, all right, we've got to figure out our own framework. Like we've got to figure out our own markets. And I am seeing that happen in South America all the time. I referenced at the beginning of the podcast that we're looking at Peru. The reason we're looking at Peru is because they're in the process of considering some pretty substantive um, legislative changes. They've already got a program that is medicinally centric, but feeds a domestic market, which a lot of countries don't do. A lot of countries go, yeah, we want all the money, but we don't want it in our backyard for whatever cultural reason. And they're flipping that equation a little bit. The Peruvian market has got a long history of relationship with plant medicine. And I love seeing how that's driving conversations down there in different ways. I think that'll put pressure on Colombia, Ecuador, all of those folks down there. And that interplay starts to and continues to drive things forward. So I'm excited about it because, you know, I've got a soft spot in my heart for all of Latin America, and I want to see it thrive.
Of course.
We spend so much time there. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting back into Peru and Colombia later this year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're great places to be, and you kind of said it right there. You know, like there's different areas of South America, just like you said, that are, you know, either online but struggling, looking for either a catalyst or some kind of other global opportunity. And the catalyst is starting to happen, like you said, like the other South American countries coming on. You know, like they're going to push the country as a whole to do better. And there's going to be more of that happening. So you're right. That inertia is already beginning and starting to change down there. I think LATAM, well, we all know it. I think LATAM is going to be a global player in the cannabis industry. Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt. Exactly how long it takes, you know, we'll see. But they're already a significant global player. It's just a matter of, you know, how does it scale? So cool. Before we close out, I always like to ask the crystal ball question. You know, so where in the short to mid range do you see sort of the best opportunities for folks? And you know, within the context of this conversation, let's say, you know, in the interplay between North and South America, where do you think the next best conversation is to be had as these markets develop?
Yeah, well, I think as these markets, you know, start to begin, as countries come on, and the true opportunity for commerce can begin between LATAM and our country, LATAM, Canada. I think the next steps are, which is like the cool stuff, right? We get into global cannabis operations there, where we, you know, are instructing global regulations on shipping and how to do all that. I think that is really, you know, the next evolution, because like you said, the inertia is happening from country to country. So how do we take those country opportunities and put them on a global scale? Well, we have to, you know, build all that. That's cool. That's the opportunity. And that's, you know, one of the great things about you, Chris, the GCNC, is you can bring all these leaders together. Folks can talk about this, put your crystal ball together and say, how do we do it? Make it happen. So
there's some really neat things happening. I mean, just in the last month, I've talked to operators. It's not theory, right? This is happening. There are plenty of operators in South America that are shipping into Australia and Europe. They're not doing it at the scale they want yet. They've created those pathways. They're there. The seeds and the transactions are beginning to happen between South America and North America, certainly with Canada and some with the United States. So yeah, I think overall the future is bright, and we've, you know, I always tell people the most successful companies I've seen in the international cannabis space are the ones who pay attention to how do I make money in the situations I have today. And as things get better and legislation works in their favor, it only gets better. If you're building your businesses based on what you think might happen, that's a pretty risky proposition. So, you know, 100%. Anchoring in today's truth with a aspirational thought about tomorrow tends to work best. So, agreed. Tim, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate the conversation and you carving out some time. It took us a couple swings to get on together, but I'm glad we made it happen. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Really enjoy it. Happy to come back anytime.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you soon. And everybody subscribe. Don't forget, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.